Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I want to help you identify what your superpower is. There's been a bit of a theme about what I've been talking recently, which is about the power and the importance of differentiation. As we come into in fact, regardless of what the time is, when it's wonderful times and everybody's making money hand over fist, it's really good for you to differentiate because it brings brand strength. But when and if we are to go into difficult times, and many practices are finding it difficult at the moment because of the uncertainty that's happening, they're seeing an increase in missed visits in this post-COVID world. There are lots of challenges. So one of the ways that you can deal with that is to differentiate. Now, I said that in a funny way, to differentiate, okay? And one of the other ways to think about this is, what is your superpower? What is it that makes you different from the other practices in your area? So I'm going to talk through maybe 4 different ways. There's many different ways when we start to study businesses and business philosophy. There are many different ways that we can differentiate ourselves, but I want to share 4 of them with you, okay? We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about relationships. We'll talk about convenience, and we'll talk about price as well. Now, just a heads up before we get into this. You will have one of these as your driver. Okay, now there are some of them that can go together, but there's some of them we really shouldn't put together. I'll tell a little story about that later on, that when you try to put some of these superpowers together, it actually, rather than it being additive, it actually takes away from it. So let's talk a little bit about innovation. Innovation happens when you offer something new and shiny, or deliver care in a new and shiny way, in a way that nobody else does. Okay, now when there's only one chiropractor in town that does it this way, and you innovate to a niche or a group of people, this is a wonderful position for your practice to be in as well. Okay, so innovation. Now, when we think about innovation, there can be 3 different categories of innovation. There can be product innovation. Okay, so maybe you've got a new technique. Maybe you have a new therapy that you've added in. Maybe it's a laser or some different sort of technology that you use. Maybe you have a new delivery kind of mechanism. One of the things that you might be thinking about this, for instance, if it might be kind of gentle, okay, non-crack chiropractic, maybe it's open plan chiropractic, or one of the chiropractors that I work with has a really fantastic pre and post care adjustment. So when you come into his practice, you literally begin your adjustment when you come in. There's pre-adjustment exercises, there's post-adjustment exercises as well, scanning technologies, posture assessment technologies. These are all examples of product innovation, okay? Now, a word on this, and I want to remind you again, maybe you're a new listener here. You might be saying, hey, listen, lots of chiropractors do exactly the same that I do, and that might be the case. But maybe a lot of chiropractors aren't actually advertising that. Just maybe all the chiropractors in your town all use the subluxation station. But are you outwardly advertising that you're doing it? Are you pointing that as a point of difference? If the other chiropractors aren't actually upfront saying it, okay, it doesn't matter whether they're doing it or not. Then we can have system innovation, okay? Maybe you're able to deliver your care in a new way. So this could be, hey, there's no appointments needed. So, there were times early on, and I did this for a number of years, where we didn't take appointments. People knew when our adjustment times were, and they could come on in and have an adjustment anytime. Now, lots of patients love this, but lots of them didn't, okay? So maybe it's monthly fees or yearly fees. Is there a system innovation that your practice could have that would differentiate you from the other chiropractors in town? And then the third category when we think about innovation is just brand innovation. This is a little softer, but how do you make chiropractic, or how do you make something that's maybe kind of boring or not all that desirable? How do we make it even more desirable? How do we make it even more exciting? Is it massage chairs in your waiting room? Is it live music? Is it coffee? Is it food? How do we kind of have this brand feel that makes the way that we deliver chiropractic very different to the way that other people deliver chiropractic, okay? Now, the second one I want to talk about here is relationships. So what does relationships mean as a superpower? It means that you build such powerful relationships with your patients and potential patients that they will flat out ignore other chiropractors. Okay, now relationships is an interesting thing in there too, because I also want to explain relationships is really how the power of sponsorship works. So for instance, I might build a relationship with Michael Jordan where I love what Michael Jordan does there too, and he wears Nike, and because I have a relationship with Michael Jordan, therefore I'm much more likely to buy Nike stuff. So any sponsorship, whether it be Roger Federer, and sometimes what these big companies are doing is they are buying the relationship that this influencer has with their audience so they can piggyback on the back of it. Now that we need to think about that too. are there people in your community that if you were to align with them, that you can also get relationships with their patients? Now, I want us to talk to you about a couple of different ways that we can build relationships both internally and externally. Okay, there are a number of factors that go into it, but we build relationships with people when we understand what they value. Okay, when we have a real clear understanding. One of my favorite sayings, you've heard me say it a lot of times beforehand from Zig Ziglar, is you'll get everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. So this is about you getting really clear about who is it that you look after. Now, different people are going to value different things. Okay. For me, speed and efficiency is important. So if you can deliver an adjustment and it's a good adjustment in 1 minute, I'd much rather have a 1 minute adjustment than have a 30-minute adjustment. Okay. But people think differently about that. There are people that want to spend a long time with their adjustments. So when you're talking about and understanding what people value, this is the importance of you understanding who your who is. Okay. Now, of course, we build relationships when we show that we genuinely care. How do you show that you genuinely care? Well, you do it by genuinely caring, okay? Now, unless you're a sociopath, this means that we go above and beyond. It might be follow-up phone calls when there's something difficult or challenging happening in life. It might be kind of birthday cards, acknowledging work, promotions, things like this. So it's going above and beyond is how we show we genuinely care. We adapt to their pace. So as I mentioned beforehand, I like a quick pace with things, but not everybody does like a quick pace as well. What you want to do is you want to model the sort of behavior that you want to see. When we're building relationships, it is this connection between two people, okay? So remember that relationships take time to build. So we don't build relationships on visit one, we build relationships over time as well. So as I mentioned before, follow-up phone calls, text messages. When I think about relationships, the superpower that you want to have inside of that is really to develop your skills of empathy and compassion. You want to know the fears, dreams, frustrations of your potential patients, of your ideal patients, better than they do. When you do this, you lay the foundations for a really strong relationship. One of the clients who I was working with the other day, I was reviewing her website and I found a testimonial. I want to read this testimonial for you because this is her practice superpower, and her superpower as a chiropractor is absolutely relationships. So what this looks like for her, she was telling me, the other morning in practice, about 80% of the patients, when they finished their adjustments, turned to her and said, "I love you." Like literally, that's the sort of relationship that she has with them as well. So here's a testimonial that she has. It says, I won't mention this person's name because I haven't asked. I'm going to call her Sue, okay? We'll go with Sue. Sue is not only a brilliant chiropractor, but she's also one of the loveliest women I've ever met. She made me feel at ease immediately, and we always have a great chat during our sessions. I went in with a very odd issue that I never expected a chiropractor to be able to help, and yes, she was the only person who's ever helped me when multiple other doctors couldn't. She goes above and beyond to help people out and is clearly in the industry for helping people, not just for the sake of making money. I couldn't rate her higher. That's what a testimony looks like when you have a relationship built practice, okay? So externally, if we want to start to build relationships, then this is us standing out. So when somebody thinks about chiropractors, they're thinking about you. Now, a big part of this is a psychological phenomenon that I call, or is known as, the mere exposure effect. Now, the mere exposure effect simply means this: the more often somebody sees you, the more likely they are to like you, okay? Just means we need to show up often. That's the first thing. It's said that 90% of success in life is actually just showing up. If you're showing up consistently, this is part of, consistency is what builds trust. It's also what builds relationships as well. So we want to make sure that we're showing up consistently as well. You also want to develop your abilities to influence, okay, in the videos that you create, in the posts that you create. And again, we develop our ability to influence when we're using the language of the people that we're talking to, when we keep it simple, when we know what they want, okay, and we're able to address their challenges and we're able to provide solutions for them, okay. We want to work at becoming better known, okay. This is through social media, this is through publicity, this is through brand building activities. So again, we want to look at all the possible ways in our community that we can just become known as well. And again, can we put deals in place? This is another thing that actually builds relationships. In the early days in my practice, we had yearly fees. Somebody would pay once. There wasn't a contract per se, but if somebody has paid for the next 12 months of care with me, they're not looking for another chiropractor. We have a relationship in place. This is kind of part of why we stay with our banks, often our accountants, even the people that kind of provide our mobile phone service. When there's a contract or a relationship in place, it's kind of just harder to go somewhere else. Now, the third superpower I want to talk with you about here is the superpower of convenience. Now, convenience happens when you're answering the needs of the market with the most frictionless expression of what they want, okay? This is about your practice being in the right place at the right time and meeting any unmet needs that a patient or potential patient might have, okay? In essence, when we're thinking about convenience, it tends to refer to time, energy, effort, or the know-how that's needed to actually get a result. Okay, now when you and your practice can decrease friction, you're going to attract a lot of patients in. Okay, now one of the biggest examples of this, Amazon, for instance, put an end to most of the world's bookstores because of convenience. They made it easier for us to order books, so much so that few bookstores even exist nowadays. Okay, now when we're thinking about convenience, maybe we start to think about what sort of things could you automate to decrease friction. This might be things like prepaid fees, ease of parking. It's important that you run on time, pre-booking appointments. This is efficient adjustment times and sessions. Okay, so for me, convenience is important. You know, I'll often ring my chiropractor beforehand and find out, are they running on time? Because I don't want to be sitting in their waiting room waiting. Okay, I'd rather be doing other things. Okay, now the fourth superpower to think about here is price. Now, we often see this as a superpower, but it's often looked down upon, like it's the lesser of the superpowers, and it's absolutely not. It has every bit as valuable as the other three that we've talked about. Okay, now price as a superpower happens when you're able to create an imbalance, obviously based on price. Now, this happens when you've invested into an asset that creates efficiencies in your practice that other chiropractors don't have. Now, crucially though, here's what's important, is that you're able to deliver your adjustments at a price that's still profitable for you. Okay. Now, you are not competing on price if you're losing money, because that's not a valid or a sustainable business model. Okay. So we have to make sure that we have systems, and you've invested in assets. I'll give you some example of these assets in a little while there too, that allows you to continually deliver your care at a lower price than other chiropractors. Okay. So what kind of assets, or what kind of assets could you invest in that will allow you to do this? Okay. Now, this might be buying your premises. Now, I know for Lauren and I, we own the premises that we practice at. Now, that meant that certainly during the lockdowns of COVID and some of the subsequent changes, since that puts a certain amount of ease, we don't have any rent, or we pay ourselves rent there, but we don't have that as a pressure. We've also, when we buy equipment in the practice, we never lease it, okay? And this is something I really admire about Lauren. If she doesn't have the money to buy it outright, she doesn't buy it. So whilst in the short term, it might seem great to be leasing these things or to be renting, we've sacrificed up front so that we can buy the building, and Lauren sacrificed so that she can buy the equipment outright. That means that our practice is a lot more profitable than it might be if we were paying rent elsewhere and if we had lots of leases, okay? The other way that we're able to compete on price is really refining our systems. Look for inefficiencies, okay, particularly with regard to staff members. This leads into the next ones, which is systematize. Where can we use systems and technology rather than people when possible? Okay, now if your game that you're playing here is price, we want to use technology, okay, and automate rather than people. If the game that you're playing is in around relationships, we don't build relationships with technology as a general rule. We build relationships with people. Now, those four examples again, or the four areas that you can differentiate your practice, are innovation, their relationships, their convenience, their price. Which one do you think is your superpower? Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, we have to pick one of them that we focus on. Now, if we try and go for innovation, for instance, that, you know, we're doing something very new and we're also price, those two don't work with each other. Let me give you an example. A number of years ago, I think about this often because it was such a visceral experience for me. At the time, I had a limited edition Subaru WRX STI. For those of you that know cars, this car here was in my petrol head days, okay? So I got a note from STI saying that there was a new headlight release, and I had lots of optional extras on this car. This car was, and I think back at now, it was very noisy, very loud, very uncomfortable to drive around in, but it was very, very fast. Now, I got a note coming out, or a letter delivered to me about these new headlights. And I was reading through all the wonderful things that these headlights could do, all the innovation that was a part of them. They'd see further, they were clearer, they were a brighter light, they were all those kind of things. And as I was reading through this, I'm like, yes, I want these headlights, I want these headlights, I want these headlights. And then it came down to the bottom that said, in order to get these headlights installed, make sure that you give the dealer a call, and the installation price will be $150. Now, the price of these didn't match the innovation, because as soon as I heard $150, I went, these headlights can't be that good, and I didn't buy them, which was very, very interesting, okay? Now, had the headlights been $600 or $700 or $800, I promise you, I would have gone straight in and I would have gotten them, okay? Because innovation was what I was after, but we don't match and can't match innovation with regards to price, okay? If you are going to position yourself as an innovator, then your prices are probably going to be a little bit higher also, okay? So now, if you're not sure which of these are your superpower, then the best way to go about this is to start to interview your existing patients. And I would really encourage you to do this, even if you're really certain about what your superpower is. There's a lot of great information that will come out of asking your patients these 3 questions. And I would work hard between now and Christmas, depending on when you're listening to this, or over the next month, to see if you can ask 50 or 60 people this. Now, the 3 questions you want to ask them is, how would you describe what I do to other people? Like if somebody asked you, how would you describe what it is that we do here? Now, you want to find that out, because they will start to let you know about what it is that you do. They'll start to give you some ideas in terms of in around the superpowers that you have. The second question here will piggyback on top of that. What is the main benefit that you get from coming here? This is important. Now, all of this information is going to be important in your marketing. All of this information is going to be important that when you're creating content to communicate with people out in your community, not only on social media, but any sort of marketing, external communication that you're doing. And the third question that you'd want to actually ask them is, what's different about our practice when you're to compare it to other chiropractors or even other businesses or maybe even other health practitioners? Now, you could absolutely delegate this to your front desk staff to do, but there needs to be an elevated level of importance for this, so much so that I actually think it's important enough that you, the chiropractor, should be asking, particularly the patients that you really love to look after, your ideal patients. You'd want to ask them how they would answer those 3 questions. So remember, how would you describe to other people what it is that we do here? What's the main benefit that you get from coming here? And what's different about here compared to other chiropractors or other health practitioners or maybe even other businesses? You'll be able to mine that information there for absolute gems, for gold that you'll be able to use as your communication externally. Okay, what is your superpower? It's important first that you identify what it is, and then you need to go chips in on all of it, whether it be price, convenience, innovation, or relationships. Make that the very thing that allows you to stand out in your community. Folks, that's it for this episode. Until next time, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives, folks. I look forward to seeing you back here real soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.